Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond, and in this episode I'm going to take a look at Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising by The Op, and I'd like to thank The Op for sending me this review copy. And in this game, players play wizards trying to cooperatively defeat Voldemort and his Death Eaters before they corrupt the world. This is a game for 2 to 4 players, which plays in about 60 minutes for ages 11 and up. I'll explain how to set up the game, I'll explain the rules, and I'll give you my final thoughts. The box for Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising is pretty nice. It has a sleeve, and on the front you can see Harry Potter and Voldemort's profile here with Hogwarts in the back, and this sleeve has some newspaper articles or ancient book texts on it. On the side you can see Harry, and on the other side Voldemort. And on the back you can see some of the components. So yeah, that's basically what the box looks like. And if you slide off the sleeve, it just says Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising here. That's a pretty nice box. The back only has a wizard silhouette. So let's open it up. So inside the box, the first thing you will see is the rulebook. And it is a large rulebook, but it's pretty thin, doesn't have too many pages, and there's plenty of illustrations to explain what comes with the game, how the cards work, how the setup is done, and all the components that you need for that, and then how the rules work. Gameplay here starts at page 6 and goes on through page 11. So there's not a whole lot of rules to learn there. There's even some game variants in the back. And the back of the booklet has a legend, what all the spell tokens do and what all those faces on the dice mean, etc. So that's pretty handy to keep near the playing field. So then we got the board, which is made of 3 pieces, and you just puzzle them together like so, and you have your board. Probably need to do that way to get that symbol in the middle to match up, right? So there you go, that's the board. The back is just blank. And then we got the location cards, so that's these bigger cards. There's a few of them in here. We have a pack of the character and also location cards, so there's plenty of those. We have a bag of these red cubes that you use to track damage. We have a pack of black crystals that you use to track corruption that Voldemort spreads to these locations. Then we have a bag of tokens, pre-punched, so that's handy, you don't need to punch them. And so we have those, and of course the dice, because this is in essence a dice game. So plenty of nice looking dice in different colors with different faces on them. Looks really nice, and one big die for Voldemort's turn. So we have those as well. And then of course the centerpiece of this game, a big Voldemort figure that you put on the table, and basically where this is facing or where he's pointing his wand is where he is at the moment, so he can be at one of these 3 locations on the disc. So that is what is in the box. Let's set up a game. To set up the game, connect the 3 location boards and form the main board, like so, and place the Voldemort miniature on the board facing one random location. Take the location cards and put 2 cards on each location randomly, making sure they match their corresponding icons. There are 2 location cards for the Ministry of Magic, 2 for Diagon Alley, and 2 for Hogsmeade. Take all the spell tokens, and there are 12 different ones listed on the back of the rulebook. Flip them face down and put them within easy reach on the table. Place all the damage tokens in a supply, along with the corruption counters. Then each player chooses an affiliation. You can be part of the Hogwarts School of Magic, Dumbledore's Army, or the Order of the Phoenix. And there are 2 of each schools in the game, so one player can pick the same as another one. Also hand each player the corresponding token. Place this Lord Voldemort card somewhere in the center of the table. Search the character deck for the Lord Voldemort card and set it face down aside as well. And then each player picks a starting character from their corresponding School of Magic. If you picked Hogwarts, you can choose either Minerva McGonagall or Albus Dumbledore. If you pick Dumbledore's Army, you can be Hermione Granger or Harry Potter. And if you pick the Order of the Phoenix, you can choose Nymphadora Tonks or Sirius Black as your starting character. After players have selected, you can take all the remaining cards and shuffle them together with all the character cards to form a stack. After you shuffled all of the remaining cards, take the Lord Voldemort card and put it somewhere in the middle of the stack. Players place their character cards next to their affiliation cards, and then you take 3 cards per location and put them next to the board. Leave a bit of room beside the villain card for defeated wizards, who will be placed here in the Hogwarts Infirmary, defeated Death Eaters, who will go to Azkaban, and corrupted locations will be placed at the bottom here. During the game, players will be using these 14 wizard dice and 1 8-sided Voldemort die. That's the whole setup. Now you're ready to play. During a game of Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising, players will try to collect as many other wizards to their army as they can while trying to defeat these Death Eaters, and ultimately Lord Voldemort himself. Players can lose the game in 4 different ways. Firstly, too many wizards can be defeated. Any one player has all the wizards on their team defeated and no wizards remaining. 4 or more places are corrupted, and any one location is corrupted completely. Select who goes first. The rules suggest the person who most recently watched a Harry Potter movie, and play in clockwise order. During a turn, there are 4 phases. Firstly, you travel to a location. Secondly, you roll the Voldemort die and resolve Lord Voldemort and the Death Eater's actions. 3, roll, assign and resolve the wizard dice. And 4, you end your turn. So let's say the player with the Hogwarts cards is the first player. They take their location marker and place it on any one of those 3 locations that they wish to visit. So for example, they want to go to Diagon Alley. During a player's turn, they can only interact with the 3 face-up cards in the location that they visit. They can also interact with that location itself and the wizards on their own team. The next step is to roll the 8-sided Voldemort die. This die has 3 different sides. If the R turns up, then Lord Voldemort rotates to the right. If the L shows up, Lord Voldemort rotates to the left. And when this Death Eater's symbol shows up, Voldemort activates all Death Eaters not in his location, and Voldemort attacks the location he is currently pointing at. He also attacks the location if he rotates that he's pointing at. So in this case, I rolled an R, and the arrows also indicate in which direction. So in this case, clockwise. And then Voldemort attacks all the wizards except his own Death Eaters on that location, including any players that happen to be here. So if another player had one of their tokens over here, then all the wizards on their team would also be attacked. When a wizard is attacked, you simply take a damage token and put it on the topmost empty spot on their cards. So if one of these wizards had also had a token here, you would also need to take one of those tokens and put it on their card as well. Next, add one of these corruption tokens to Voldemort's location on the top card in that location. And then any Death Eaters in Voldemort's location will have their regular abilities activated. So for example, Lucius Malfoy here has 2 abilities, and there is a top one here. If Voldemort is present, remove a damage from each other Death Eater. Now right now there isn't any damage on the only other Death Eater in play, so nothing happens, but otherwise you would remove one of those tokens. This is their second ability, which only triggers whenever this symbol is rolled on the Voldemort die. So had I rolled this symbol and Voldemort had already been pointing here, for example, and this wouldn't be the case still. So first of all, Voldemort attacks, then adds these tokens. Then he activates the regular ability of the Death Eater in his location. And lastly, he activates all the special abilities of all the Death Eaters in play, which is in this case Lucius Malfoy's ability, which states, let me see, also add a corruption to the Ministry of Magic location. So that is another corruption in that case over here. If this Death Eater also had one of those secondary abilities, that would have triggered as well, but fortunately this one only has a basic ability, so that does not trigger. If there are more Death Eaters in play, we resolve them clockwise, starting from the location that Voldemort is in, and then the others. Lastly, if any location is completely corrupted, its penalty will also trigger. So for example, if I take a look at this card, if this place is corrupted, players cannot use spell tokens this turn. So more on spell tokens in a bit. So then it's time for the main phase in a character's turn, which is the roll, assign, and resolve wizard dice phase. In this case, the Hogwarts player will have 2 blue dice, 1 red and 1 purple. So you collect those dice from the pool and you roll them. Some characters have abilities that will grant you extra dice to roll, and sometimes you may also have a token that will grant you an extra die. Tokens are simply spent after use, and these abilities are triggered under certain conditions. So for example, here Minerva says if you have another Hogwarts wizard on your team, roll an extra blue die each turn. Now, since the Hogwarts player was in this location in Diagon Alley, they can interact with any or all of these wizards, and you try to recruit them by rolling the icons on the top of their cards. Now this player had a very lucky roll because they rolled a sword, the wands, a double hat, and a double phoenix. Now for example, this card here, to be recruited, requires 2 phoenix symbols, 1 wand symbol and 1 sword symbol. Now anytime you have a 2 or a higher number here, that means that many icons have to be present on that card, because you place your dice on the card after each roll. You select at least 1 die to spend. So if I hadn't rolled a double phoenix symbol on this die, I could have also used 2 single phoenix results if I had rolled that. So if I hadn't rolled as well as I did right now, I could have taken one of these dice and allocated them to this card, for example, and then take the remaining dice and re-roll them. But after every roll, I have to allocate 1 die to one of these cards. If I cannot do that because nothing matches or nothing is of use to me, I have to discard one of the dice back to the pool before re-rolling the remaining dice. Now, since I rolled quite well, I can also try and recruit this blue card because I would like to unlock McGonagall's ability here to have another Hogwarts wizard and get an extra die each turn. So instead of allocating this double phoenix to Remus here, I'll have to check what I need here. I need 1 phoenix, 2 sorting hats, and 1 wand. So I think I actually have that. Now this is a double phoenix, but that doesn't matter. Any remaining phoenixes are simply lost. So this counts for one phoenix. I'll take the double sorting hat for the double sorting hat symbol over here and the wand over here. So with one roll, I have already recruited this character. And so then I can choose to end my turn. I take the recruited character and put it in my army. So let's say I rolled something else and I wanted to recruit this character. Then I could have said, okay, I'm going to put this symbol on this card. Hey, maybe also this one. This is the one sword I need over here, but I still need the magic wands. So then I've allocated at least one die to a card. I can pick up the remaining ones and re-roll them. And now I did roll on both dice actually this wand symbol. So had this been a 2 wands, I could have used both dice for that as well. And then after you've selected and taken a card, or maybe you didn't manage to recruit a card at all, you end your turn. Had I been in a location with a Death Eater, I could also use my dice not to recruit a character, but to try and damage a Death Eater. And that works in exactly the same way. Death Eaters also have a required number of symbols on the top of their cards, and if I roll that and allocate it to this card, I get to do 1 damage to their card. And when you successfully do that, you simply take one of these tokens and put it on top of their card. And that will stay there unless they're somehow healed by some effect. And whenever you manage to place enough damage on them to fill up their entire health track, they are damaged at the end of the turn, they are defeated and placed in the Azkaban prison. Tokens are then returned to the pool. Now, in the example where I recruited Madame Hooch, I rolled this phoenix, I rolled the double sorting hat, I believe it was on this die, and I rolled one of these. If I had any remaining dice that I could still use, then I can do so, because all of these location cards, these factions, also have special abilities. So for example, Hogwarts here says if I roll the sword, I can remove a corruption token from my location, so the location I am currently at. Or if I roll a double sorting hat, I can draw a spell token. All other players with at least 2 Hogwarts wizards on their team may also draw a spell token. So I could have perhaps used this one to remove a corruption from my location, but I was over here and nothing was corrupted there. So that was unfortunate, but I could have had there been any corruption tokens there. And it is possible to either recruit multiple cards or to damage multiple Death Eaters or a combination thereof if you have enough dice and you roll well. So then when you end your turn, either when you've used all your dice or you've forfeited all your dice and you can't successfully assign any dice to complete at least one card, then any successfully recruited wizards go to your army. Any successfully defeated Death Eaters go to the Azkaban prison. And every time you damage a Death Eater, that player takes one of these spell tokens randomly, flips them over and puts them on their card. The back of the rulebook has all of these spell tokens explained, and that is very handy. And these are very, very useful because you can use any of these symbols as a die result. You simply discard the token and use that result to recruit a card or to damage a Death Eater. You can add an extra die to your roll, and the final 4 are either removing a corruption token, removing a damage from 2 wizards, remove 2 damage from 1 wizard, or exchange a wizard with another player. It also shows you which facings are on each die. Now obviously the red die is from the Order of the Phoenix and has more Phoenix results and stands for loyalty. The yellow die stands for bravery and has multiple sword results. The purple Dumbledore's Army die stands for friendship and has multiple wand faces. And the blue Hogwarts die stands for knowledge and has multiple sorting hat faces. So it's very important to remember that every time you damage a Death Eater, you get to pick one of those tokens that you can use at any time, even during another player's turn. After the supply of spell tokens is completely exhausted, turn all the used tokens face down, shuffle them, and create a new supply. If a location card is fully corrupted at the end of a player's turn, it is taken from the board and placed under the villain card over there. Now, whenever this dark mark symbol is rolled, even when a corrupted place is underneath the villain card, their dark mark ability will still trigger. If a wizard card has all its slots damaged, then it is also removed from play and placed in the infirmary over there. Lastly, you replace all the empty spots on the table with new cards from the character deck, and then it's the next player's turn in clockwise order. There are a few things that are important to remember, and that is that the number of squares on a card is the maximum damage that character can take. So even if this card is entirely filled during a turn and this character takes extra damage, no extra markers are added, and players have until the end of their turn to try and remove damage or to recruit them. And another thing to remember is that whenever a character with damage is recruited, all that damage is gone. Though if a character is fully damaged and also recruited in the same turn, they still go to the infirmary. Any special abilities on either an affiliation card or a wizard card can only be activated once per turn. And whenever a Death Eater ability requires a player to add damage to either the most or the least damaged wizards on their team or on the board, and they have multiple wizards that are tied for the highest or lowest damage, then all of those wizards will take damage, including if they have 0 damage. And so as the game progresses, you will be recruiting more wizards, maybe losing some wizards, and trying to damage and defeat these green Death Eaters cards. And at some point, you will go through this deck and you will encounter Lord Voldemort. When this happens, place the Lord Voldemort card on the villain card, and he can now be attacked by any player whose team is present in Voldemort's location. And you do that by assigning dice, just like you do with Death Eaters. And Lord Voldemort, as you can see, has a requirement of 3 sword tokens. Also, Lord Voldemort has 5 damage squares on his card, so he needs 5 damage in order to be defeated and to win the game. However, he can only be targeted as many times as there are cards in Azkaban. So this means in order to completely be able to defeat Lord Voldemort, you will need at least 5 Death Eaters in Azkaban before you can completely defeat him. Voldemort does not count as a Death Eater when resolving any character or corrupted place abilities. But players do gain a spell token each time they successfully damage Lord Voldemort. And because Lord Voldemort's actions are resolved after the active player deploys their team, players have the ability to redeploy their team to Lord Voldemort's location after resolving his actions, such as attacking wizards, corrupting places, and triggering Death Eaters. So once Lord Voldemort has been revealed, a player may redeploy their team to his location by forfeiting 1 wizard die of their choice from their dice pool before rolling for the turn. Now the game is instantly won whenever Lord Voldemort takes his 5th damage. However, this must be done before any of the following losing conditions occurs. Players lose the game when in a 2-player game 8 wizards are defeated and in the infirmary. In a 3-player game it's 10, and in a 4-player game it's 12 wizards. You also lose when any one of the player loses their last wizard and has no more wizards left. Players also lose when 4 or more places are corrupted, or any one location has its final place fully corrupted as well, which is the printed icon on the board itself. If any of these losing conditions happen and the end of the turn triggers, then the players lose. But if they do manage to damage Voldemort a 5th time before the end of the turn, the players still win. And those are all the rules for Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising. Let's go to my final thoughts. So my final thoughts on Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising by The Op. Let's start with the presentation. So first of all, the components are great. I really like the fact that you get this cool Voldemort miniature that you place in the center of your table. The cards are of a very good quality. They are thick enough. I've sleeved them because they get shuffled. But the thickness is good. They're not the thickest kind I've ever seen, but they're pretty thick. They have a glossy, a shiny finish to them, so they're not matte. So they do have a bit of a shine, but the sleeves will make them shine anyway, so that doesn't bother me that much. The dice are nice and big, chunky dice in a kind of a off-white bone color, and they have colored icons on the sides, and each of them has their own color, so it's clear and easy to make out which dice to get when you need them. I also like the big chunky D8 with the Voldemort symbols on them. That's pretty cool as well. You have these clear red cubes for the damage counters and these gray crystals for the corruption counters, and that all works very well. I really like that. You have your affiliation cards with the turn overview on the back, so if you have less well, you always have some cards left because there are 6 of these and you can play up to 4. So you can put one of these on the table with the summary, which is nice. All the tokens are pretty thick, a nice thick and sturdy cardboard. Also your player tokens, and the icons on these tokens are very clear, so there is no mistaking what they do. The art on the cards isn't actually art. Well, there is some art, of course, the symbols and the logos and everything, and the layout of the cards is very nicely done, but the pictures are all stills from the movie, of course, from the Harry Potter franchise. Some people do prefer actual original artwork, but I don't mind that much. I like the IP, I like the movies, so I do like seeing all of those characters that you've seen in the movies on all of those cards. So I kind of like it as it is, although artwork would have been cool as well. But all the cards do have a different image on them, so none of them are double. They're all unique, and that's pretty nice. Thematically, it is, of course, from the Harry Potter movies, and we've also seen the Death Star Rising and Thanos Rising with the Star Wars and the Marvel IPs from the Op as well. So the theme is kind of like slapped on. It doesn't really matter that much, but they're all similar. You're all playing the good guys, fighting the bad guys, and the bad guys are trying to corrupt the world, or build the Death Star or whatever, get the Infinity Glove ready. So the theme, the IP is kind of interchangeable, but it does work. The theme does work with this kind of game. It's a cooperative game where everybody is a couple of the good guys. You're gathering your army of wizards in this case, trying to fight Voldemort and his Death Eaters, and I think the theme works really nicely. And if you're in doubt as to which game to get from this series, just pick the IP you like most, because the rules for the game aren't that different. There are some minor differences. For example, the Dark Side Rising one has a Death Star that you're building, so the locations is several parts of the Death Star which have a negative impact on the game once they're finished. And here you have these locations, and whenever a place is fully corrupted, it goes to the villain card, and its effect will stay in play every time you roll the dark sign. So that is more or less the same, but it works slightly differently. But in general, the games are more or less the same, so you can pick whichever you like. Personally, I slightly prefer the Star Wars one, but I really like this one as well, and I have both of them in my collection, and I plan on keeping them both because I do like to mix up the themes once in a while. So that brings me to gameplay. I really enjoy it because it is a cooperative game. You can discuss which actions you want to take and where you want to go and which wizards you should recruit or which Death Eaters you want to get rid of fast. And you can help each other with these tokens. So whenever you damage a Death Eater, you get one of these tokens. You really need to remember that because you use these a lot. And you can use somebody else who is just shy of one logo of one of these pictures that they need on their dice, and they might just not make it. And you could say, well, I happen to have one of these sword tokens that you need. I'll give you that and discard that token, and you can still recruit that wizard or damage that Death Eater. And that is just a lot of fun. And you never know where Voldemort's gonna go, so you might get in trouble. It's a very tense game. Damage really racks up very fast, especially when characters are tied for least or most damage. Then they all get damaged, and you really want to get those recruited wizards into your army as fast as possible and go through that deck so you find Voldemort and can start, dealing damage to him. But you do need 5 Death Eaters to be able to fully defeat him. You can get started with 1 or 2 whenever you find him, but ideally have several Death Eaters already defeated before Voldemort shows up, so you can get at him right away. And that's just very enjoyable. I really like that. You're constantly discussing, so this character is almost dead, we should try and recruit this one, and maybe I can help you with a token with an extra die here, take that, so you can roll an extra die so we can get that one into our army. And maybe one want to get rid of this Death Eater because he's got a really nasty ability that triggers every time and that will get us killed quickly. So there's a lot of things to discuss, and that's just a lot of fun in cooperative games. So I really, really enjoy this. The replayability is also very good because the game plays in about an hour, which usually is enough for one game, and then you move on to another game if you still want to play some games. But even if you lose this game, it's usually very tight. It's, a matter of last turn when something happens. You either win or lose. It's quite tight. So if you win, you still have that feeling of, wow, that was tense. Let's try it again and see if we win this time, So replayability is pretty good. There's plenty of cards in here, and the game plays out differently every time because of the random cards and the random locations you have, and the randomness of Voldemort going left or right or just attacking the spot he is on. You never know what's gonna happen, so the game plays out differently every time. And sure, there's some luck involved here as well, but it's easily mitigated because you can cooperate, and I do enjoy that. The only negative point I have is the language dependency. So this game is language dependent because there is text on all the cards, because obviously they have their abilities, and the faction cards have their abilities. So there's quite a bit of text that you need to be able to read, so you do need to have a firm grasp of the English language if you want to play one of these Rising games. But all in all, I really enjoy all of these games by The Op, so I'm giving it a big 2 thumbs up. And that's it. That was my review of Harry Potter Death Eaters Rising. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you hit the bell icon, you'll also get notified whenever I upload a new video to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.